Exciting video for you today because we're going to talk about working with a PATCHBAY in a home studio. I received a bunch of questions regarding the pair of PATCHBAYs that I have on my setup since my studio tour video. But the big question remains, do you really need a PATCHBAY in your home studio? Let's find out. Hey, what's up my friend? Selim here from Mixdown Online. Hope you're good, hope you're well. Now, before we jump into this video, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. More on that later. But now let's talk about PATCHBAYs. What I'm going to do in this video is first I'm going to explain to you what a PATCHBAY is and what is the use of a PATCHBAY in a studio. Then I'm going to show you the way I set up my PATCHBAY, all of my connections into my PATCHBAY, to manage all of the gear that I have. And I'm also going to answer, of course, the big question of if you actually need a PATCHBAY in your home studio. So, what is a PATCHBAY? A PATCHBAY is like a hub for all of your studio gear. So you have access to all the outputs and inputs right in front of you. Like I have here, I have two PATCHBAYs where all of my gear are connected into. So this way I have access to all the outputs and inputs of all of the gear so I can patch them around when I want to, which is very, very useful. Now there's different types of PATCHBAYs. The one that I'm using right now is a 1/4-inch connector PATCHBAY, meaning that the cables that I'm using to patch the signal around are 1/4-inch cables. And this one is the Samsung Patch Plus, which is a 48-point balanced PATCHBAY. These are actually not too expensive. I think they cost like 150 bucks each or so. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to leave the link below if you want to check it out. Usually 1/4-inch type PATCHBAYs are pretty affordable. There's also TT connection PATCHBAYs where the patch cables are way smaller, when you can manage a lot of gear and fit that into a very small space in your rack mount. And there's also digital type PATCHBAYs where you can control all of the routing straight from the computer. Way more expensive, but very practical. Now, the way a PATCHBAY is going to work, very simple. You have to think of it as a waterfall. You have all the outputs at the top row, and this is very important. This is like a #1 rule when it comes to PATCHBAY connections. You always connect the output of every gear you have on the top row of a PATCHBAY, and then the inputs at the bottom row of a PATCHBAY. So this way, you're gonna have like the output falling down into the input. So like a waterfall, which is the common example given to explain the flow of a PATCHBAY. So the signal goes out from the top and goes back down, falls down to the input at the bottom. In my case, all of my the output of my interface are connected through the top. Same for the output of my my preamps, compressors are all connected on the top row of the first PATCHBAY. We're going to look into my connections later on in this video. Some will go down straight into the inputs of my audio interface, okay? But again, more on that later. So the way you connect your gear is you connect everything at the back of the PATCHBAY where you have balanced TRS connectors in my case. And then when it comes to the flow, we have different modes that we need to look at. There's the normal mode, which means that the top row is going to go down to the second row, okay? Output to input right away, you know. So whatever connections you have at the back of the PATCHBAY, the normal mode will follow exactly what you have connected at the back of the PATCHBAY. It's going to follow that flow. So for example, the output 1 and 2 are coming out of my interface, and they're going into input 1 and 2, like the first two inputs of the second row that are going straight into my monitor controller that feeds my studio monitors. Okay, so I don't need to patch things around from the front. Everything has been connected from the back of the PATCHBAY. Now, the second mode is the half normal mode. So that means that the signal is going to fall down from top to bottom, like it does with the normal mode. But also, if you connect a cable from the output and you want to patch the output somewhere else on straight into another input. With normal mode, what's going to happen is that the signal is going to be cut off when you keep it at normal. But when you keep it at half normal, that means that when you're going to plug or connect a patch cable, the signal is still going to go from top to bottom on top of being redirected through the cable, the patch cable. Okay, so you're going to have like two signals going on. The one going through the cable and the one going through the waterfall, let's say. But in normal mode, that signal is not going to go through the waterfall, but it's going to be cut off and only follow the patch cable. So this is the most simplest way I can put it. And there's the through mode, which is the one right here in the middle, which is basically going to cut the waterfall. You know, so the output connector is going to stay in output. It's not going to go anywhere. So the top row is not going to go straight into the bottom row. It's just going to stay put. So that is through mode. Now the cool thing with this Samsung PATCHBAY is that the modes, the PATCHBAY modes, are right here on front and very accessible. Usually you're going to find those at the back of the PATCHBAY or on top. In my case, since the PATCHBAYs are right in the center, like in the middle of my rack mount, it's more practical to have access to those modes right on front. The downside though is there's no space for me to write down where those connections lead to. Okay, so usually on a PATCHBAY you have some space where you can actually put on a sticker or something where you can write some stuff down. So you know, it's very easy to know where these connections are going, you know, and which gear they are routed to. In my case, it's not possible. So what I had to do is to just write down a PATCHBAY connection sheet on a Google Sheet document, and this is what I have right here, as you can see. So all of my top, if we look at the first PATCHBAY that I have on top, the top row, briefly, the first from connection 1 through 8, these are the outputs coming out of my interface, the AXR4 interface, from out 1 to 8. Then the Vintic audio, which is a preamp, I have the outputs coming out of output 9 through 12 on the PATCHBAY. Then the output of the drummer comes out of for 13 and 14, the Crème compressor 15, 16, and then the Stam audio 17. Now, if you look at the Vintec from channel 9 through 16, starting at the Vintec and going down to the second channel of the Crème compressor, they are normalized to go down to input 5 through 12 out of my audio interface, which are line level inputs. They're going right into these inputs. I don't need to patch anything. Now, I kept the first 4 inputs, which are also preamps, out of my interface right here on front. They are not going into the PATCHBAY because they are accessible from the front. So there's no need for me to use a PATCHBAY to manage those 4 inputs. Okay, and same for, if I look at my Vintic audio, I have line inputs only. The line inputs also are not going into the PATCHBAY, only the microphone inputs. If I look at the bottom, the second PATCHBAY, first row are all of my microphones from my recording room. Now, I decided to connect the my mic snake, the XLR snake, straight into the first row as outputs. So this way I can just manage mics around if I need to. If I, in a case where I do a review on a sound interface, which I often do, I can actually use the interface right here, you know, plugged in microphones from the recording room, whether I'm recording a vocal, a guitar, a drums, or whatever, and use these outputs, which are basically the microphone connectors, and plug that straight into the new interface and work that out. So for me, it's very practical to have that set up this way, but it's not a usual thing for a home studio to have it, you know, this way. But in my case, it's very useful. And that's the cool thing about PATCHBAYs. You can actually do whatever you want. You know, you can set that up your way. The only thing that needs to be respected is first row are outputs, second row, the bottom row, are inputs. That's it. Whatever you want to do afterwards is up to you, and that's the beauty of setting up a PATCHBAY system. And it's always a work in progress, you know. So right now, this is what I have set up at the moment, but you know, that doesn't mean that it's going to always stay this way. Maybe I'm going to find another way to connect, you know, gear differently to be more practical. So, but for now, that works pretty well for me. We'll see in the future what's going to happen. And I still have some space free for future gear if I want to integrate future gear. So if I continue, all of those microphones are going straight down the waterfall, down to all those inputs, which are the Vintech 4 preamps that I have, drummer, 2 preamps on the drummer, and there's also 2 compressors, which it's a preamp compressor unit. So I have 2 line inputs that are in the PATCHBAY at the bottom channel 31 and 32. And mic 7 and 8 that are right above are going nowhere. So now they are set up to through mode, okay? So they're not going anywhere. They're not going, I don't want them to go straight into the line inputs of the drummer, okay? So if I need to use them, I'm just gonna need to patch them around. Then output 9 through 16, which again are microphone connections coming from my recording room, are going down through the, straight into the preamp, the PreSonus M80 preamps. And those preamps are going into the Lynx converters. Now, the Lynx right now at the moment is not connected through the PATCHBAY, but I could if I want to. Right now, I don't see the use for it because I don't use it this way. I only use those converters for these preamps, and that's it. If I need to change things around, I'm just going to buy some extra cables and patch those around, and I'm going to be good to go. Like I said, it's a work in progress, but for now, this is the setup that I have right now. I just want to take a few seconds to talk to you about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. As you know, Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives. They have thousands of classes that can help you build new creative skills and help you get lost and try new things. They got classes on everything from topics like music production, photography, illustration, design, video production, fine art, web development, and much more. At the moment, on my side, I'm taking a class by Fred Trevino called Color Grading, 10 Quick Tips from a Pro Colorist. Since I produce weekly videos on my YouTube channel, this type of class is perfect. It's going to help me to improve my skills in video editing and make my videos look even better. Fred Trevino also has a class on creating a cinematic look with color grading that I'm planning on taking after. If you're creative like myself, you will definitely love Skillshare. Now, the first thousands of my subscribers to click the link in the description down below will get a free trial of the premium membership, so you can get a chance to explore your creativity. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Now, let me give you a quick example of what I can do with a PATCHBAY in a situation where I'm recording a vocal and I want to record that vocal with compression. Okay, so let's say I'm using the first preamp out of the Vintech Audio preamps. I'm gonna patch output number 9, which is the output of that preamp, and I want to use let's say the compressor out of the Tegler Crème. Okay, so let's go, and this one is patched to 31. So this is the input of the Tegler Crème, and automatically this is going to go to the output of the Tegler Crème, which is 15, which is going to go down, it's going to fall down the waterfall, and it's going to go down to input number 11 out of my interface. So in Cubase, the input of the channel I'm going to record on is going to be routed to input 11. Now let's say, I'm not very confident by using a compressor while recording a vocal. I also want to record the dry signal. I can do so. I'm going to keep that connection as is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my connection is set up to half normal. So this way, when I'm going to send the output of the preamp to the compressor, the signal is not going to break, because when it's set up to normal mode, like I said earlier, that signal is going to be broken and the signal is not going to fall down to the input. Okay, it's going to go straight into the compressor. But by having that to half normal mode, that signal is going to go straight into the compressor, which is going to come out into my interface at input 11, and also is going to fall down to input 5 out of my interface, which is the normalized input right below the output of the Vintech preamp. So this way I can record the dry signal and also the compressed signal and experiment with that, which is actually very cool. Now, do you really need a PATCHBAY in your home studio? Now, that depends. If you're in a situation where you work with a limited amount of inputs and outputs out of your interface and you have a lot of outboard gear, now a PATCHBAY might be a good idea. Now, if you're looking for more flexibility to patch things around while recording and mixing, yes, a PATCHBAY might be very useful. If, like me, you end up moving things around when it comes to routing while recording and mixing, and you just spend a lot of time at the back of your rack plugging and unplugging things around from preamps to compressors, EQs, interface, and so on, at this point, you know, it might be time for you to get a PATCHBAY. But if you work in the box 100% when mixing and you only need like a limited amount of inputs and outputs from an interface to produce your music, a PATCHBAY is not going to be useful whatsoever, since you have everything in front of you right away. And same if you have like a bunch of gear that you work with that are you know, lying around the desk and not necessarily part of a rack mount, and you always have access to the input and outputs of that gear. I don't think there's a use to get a PATCHBAY at this point. And same if you have some outboard gear, but you have way more inputs and outputs out of your interface to manage that gear, a PATCHBAY is not going to be helpful. And also, if you're just fine with the routing you have right now and you don't feel the need to go back at the back of the rack mount to repatch things around every time you record and mix, if everything is working fine as they are, you don't need a PATCHBAY, you know. Now on my side, I worked for years with, you know, typically the same kind of setup without a PATCHBAY, and it worked okay. But I was just spending a lot of time at the back of the rack mount to just repatch things around. Every time I wanted to try some things while recording and mixing, I spent just way too much time at the back of the rack. And at this point, it just gives me way more flexibility to have a PATCHBAY. And also, I rent the studio to a friend of mine that comes with his own laptop and interface, but he uses the room, the microphones, the gear that I have to record and produce his clients. And for him, it's easier to bring his laptop and interface since he works in Pro Tools and not in Cubase. And this way he can just patch everything using the PATCHBAY and have access to all of the gear that I have that goes through that PATCHBAY. So very useful in this case. All right, my friends, so I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave everything down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please do like the video and share this video as well, and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Until next time, take care and see ya.